Welcome to another episode of our podcast here today, Making Dollars and Cents. I'm Ron Cunningham. I'm here with my host today, Jocelyn Towler. Actually happens to be my broker as well. And we have Mr. Michael Evans joining us today, guys. Please welcome all of my guests for the day. Jocelyn, Mike.
Thank you.
Good to see you too.
Good to be here.
Yeah. And actually, Jocelyn is co-hosted with me today. My co-host has changed a tad bit for this particular segment, and I am so honored to have you here with me today, Jocelyn.
Thank you.
How you been?
Great.
Yeah? What's been new?
Everything.
Everything. Ready for the holidays?
Ready for the holidays.
All right.
We're celebrating the end of the year, and this gives us a great opportunity to reflect on all of our successes and blessings.
I totally agree. Big Mike, what about you, man? How you holding up?
Oh, you know me. I'm blessed. I'm definitely blessed. I'm very grateful to be here and for us to end up the year and to talk about the topic that we're going to speak on today.
Well, speaking of that, let's cut right into it. Today we're here to speak on the Detroit properties. As you see in our backdrop, that's the Detroit skyline, in case you guys ever wonder where that is. And that's one of our major points of reference this year is the Detroit market and investing in Detroit. Mike happens to be an expert. He's one of my friends / colleagues that has a whole lot of information about that. And I want to dive in. I want to get into how's the market and what have you found out since we've seen you last on the show, and what are your thoughts, man? Go ahead and dive in and tell them about Detroit.
Well, I think, but before we dive into Detroit, let's remind everybody what's the whole reason why you have the podcast in the first place.
Well, here at Real Quest, we're here really just to teach. What we want to teach is how to invest in real estate. Our goal is to teach the community real estate and generational wealth. Again, this is for real estate investments for individuals. Also, we are real people. Feel free to reach out to us. Our information will be below. Real Quest Realty Corp. You can find us on IG at Real Quest Realty Corp. We have a website that we'll also put down. Our phone number is 310-205-5200. If you want to call, feel free to call. One of our secretaries will get us the message and get us right back in touch with you if we're not available at the time. With that being said, let's just dive into the show. I want to make sure that we give Mike an ample amount of time. And Jocelyn, you may want to add something as well in regards to what we do and what infrastructure we have in place today.
Well, like Ron was saying, that we do real estate loans and real estate investment. And it's not only for the youth, but also professionals and also people who are retiring or thinking about their retirement.
Okay, thank you for that. So, Mike, we wanted to get back with you, man. We had interviewed you several weeks ago. We had a great turnout. We got a lot of likes, a lot of people coming back asking questions, and we figured why not just bring them back on the show so you can kind of dive a little deeper than where we left off. We understand that you have a platform in place, and you're doing a lot of things out in the city of Detroit. Please expand and let us know exactly what you've been doing lately.
So I run a company called the BNIC Network.
Mm-hmm.
We're all about supporting the black community to become self-sufficient, self-reliant, and self-determinant. And we're using Detroit as our platform, as our template, because it's the blackest city in the United States. But to give you a little bit of history of why Detroit went through the worst bankruptcy in U.S. history of any city back in 2013.
Wow.
Came out of that, I think it was in 2014, 2015. And then in 2018, with the implementation of the Opportunity Act that created opportunity zones, they went through this whole process of redeveloping their downtown area, starting in 2018. And then they jumped over the black neighborhoods, went into the suburbs, and have been focusing on rebuilding that, but have basically left our community alone, right? So this is a great opportunity for us specifically as blacks to go into our neighborhoods and to stop them from being gentrified, and instead to keep them black owned and black controlled by investing black money. So that's the reason for Detroit. And there's basically two different ways that you can go about any type of real estate investing, right? You can either flip homes or you can do buy and hold homes. And so we can delve deeper into those.
Let me ask you this question. You mentioned flipping. Here in California, rule of thumb was buy a property, say, for $800,000, put $100,000 or so in, and be able to flip it at $1.5 million, $1.2 million, $1.3 million. Those were some pretty big margins. What type of margins are you seeing out in Detroit? I know it's a lot smaller, but I just want to give me an example, a case example.
And so I've been working on this for a couple of years. And so back in 2020, you were able to buy a distressed property in the hood and rehab it total for about $25,000.
Oh, my God.
Right, $25,000 in. That's less than the price of a car.
Man, that's closing costs for the average deal here in California. So remember that, guys. $25,000, you're all in. Okay.
So $25,000 all in, and then you'd be able to flip that to an out-of-state investor for $40,000, $50,000.
Not a bad
So
day. Okay.
over the last 2 years, the housing markets that we're focused in have appreciated by 40 to 50% per year. Wow. Per year. Right? And so imagine if you take California money and you go into Detroit with those type of margins. So now here we are at the end of 2022, and that typical house, which is a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, about 1,000 square foot, now to purchase it and rehab is about $50,000 all in, or maybe about $40,000 all in. And now you can sell that property for about $60,000 to $70,000 to an out-of-state investor.
So the numbers have increased, but they're still there. They're still attractive.
Definitely. And so you hear about how the housing market is softening, right? But you have to understand, the housing market is by specific location. So here in California, yes, the prices have softened. They've come down in certain markets. If you're trying to flip a home, you're going to run into some issues of trying to keep the same margins that you're used to here in California. In Detroit, in the hood, those numbers are still there. And that's why so many people from out of state, from out of country, especially in the Middle East, are investing millions of dollars into Detroit. We as black people, we need to invest in our own communities.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, speaking of numbers, I remember we spoke earlier. You said out here on the average property, it's about $500,000. We're just using the number, $500,000 to even start in the game out here. But if we took $500,000 out into this area that you're speaking of, if my math is right, that's approximately 10 houses.
Correct. Wow. Definitely.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, I use the example where I live up in the Antelope Valley, where houses run on average about $400,000, $500,000. And if you were to try to flip homes out there, again, you've got to come up with that cash. So let's say if you get a distressed property for $400,000 and you try to flip it for $500,000, right? You're going to try to make $100,000. Well, that's basically a 25% return on your cash of $400,000. Well, by the same token, take that $400,000, go into Detroit, get 10 homes that you can flip for, let's just say, $60,000. So now that $400,000 has turned into $600,000, you just made an extra $100,000. And instead of investing in one property, now you're investing in 10 properties. So if you have an issue and one property goes bad, you're only going to lose a little bit, versus out here in California, you run into a problem with that one property, all of your money is at risk.
I have a question. Given that we're in, people sometimes call this inflation, but we know that the interest rates are going up. What is the difference between, what kind of impact does it have when you're trying to leverage homes that are $500,000 versus a home like in Detroit for $50,000? Does it have as much of an impact?
Oh, sure. So it all has to come out with borrowing costs, right? So unless you've got a whole bunch of cash and you're doing strictly cash deals, you're going to have to borrow some money. And so when inflation goes up and the Fed increases its Fed rate, all of the borrowing costs go up. Even if you're dealing with hard money rates have gone up. And because we're either in a recession or going into a recession, the borrowing standards have tightened, right? And so where it used to be a lot easier to get money and you might have only had to put down 10 to 20%. Now they're looking at 25, 30%, right? And so when you're dealing with large numbers of $500,000, it requires higher cash at a higher rate versus let's go to Detroit. When you're talking about $40,000 all in, that's a whole different dynamic, right? It's a lot easier to get $40,000 to then come as an all cash deal than it is to try to get $400,000.
Exactly.
So when you're dealing with lower numbers and you're dealing with a lot more properties, you got to remember there's a government entity in Detroit called the Detroit Land Bank that has, at the end of a couple of years ago, they had 80,000 parcels that they were trying to get rid of, right? Starting at $1,000 for a junk house on it. So the market is totally different. We don't have anything in California that even resembles the type of market and the number of houses and parcels that they have available in Detroit.
Sounds like a real estate candy land. So you just can kind of walk down the street and pick where you want to go and where you want to get started.
Well, so here's the interesting thing, right? Because then the question comes, well, why haven't investors been investing in the heart of Detroit with these low-cost properties? And a lot of it has to do with the philosophy, okay? And so most rich people, when they invest in what are called Class A properties. These are high-end luxury properties. These are found along, in coastal communities, high cost and high returns. That's Class A. Then the next is Class B. Class B is middle class, suburbs, right? And then you have Class C. Class C is your midtowns, your working class. And then you have Class D. Class D is considered ghetto, it's considered hood, it's considered subsidized housing. When most rich people want to stay in Class A and Class B, sometimes they'll get down into Class C, and you're seeing that a lot now with hedge funds investing in what are called build-to-rent communities. They're building a lot of Class B and Class C housing. And a lot of rich people do not want to go into Class D at all. But from a return on your investment, when you're looking at making the most money for every dollar that you invest, Class C and D by far exceed Class A and Class B. But you know what rich people call those people who typically invest in Class D?
I'm not sure. What is it?
They've been called slumlords.
Yeah.
Right? And rich people don't want to be classified as slumlords. And so they would rather not make that extra money and stay up in Class A and Class B and stay respectable. Now, we're coming with a whole different philosophy. Let's invest in Class C and Class D, and let's turn them into Class A and Class B communities. Because that's typically what they do when they gentrify our neighborhoods. They go into those Class C, Class Ds, they buy up everything, they raise the rents,
they get it real cheap.
They raise the rents, they raise the values, those raise the property taxes. The people that are there that own their houses outright can no longer afford paying the property taxes, so then they wind up being forced to sell, and the whole community becomes gentrified.
Now they do a one good thing though. They do clean up the property and get it fixed up, and it's looking good again. That's one thing I've noticed.
True, but then the original inhabitants are no longer there. Because they can't afford to get there. They can't afford to live there anymore. And so, we bring a different philosophy of let's go in, let's do the same type of thing, clean up our neighborhoods, but let's keep the property values reasonable, let's keep the rents reasonable, because our number one goal is not profit. Profit will come, but that's not our number one goal. Our number one goal is to help the Black community to become self-sufficient, self-reliant, and self-determinant.
Yeah, you're going to get a lot of pushback. So we really want you to understand what he means. Money is important. You are in it. We are, and they are in it for business, but it's not the only goal. And that's just a good point to bring. I mean, I've seen it happen in areas like Baldwin Hills and View Park, and it's real sad to see a grandmother pass away and the grandson can't move into the house and keep the house. You know, I see it a lot. So many different generational fallbacks. When the mother and the grandparents move on, the kids can't continue the legacy. So that means the Thanksgiving dinners and the Christmas dinners are no longer at grandma's house, simply because they were forced to sell it. Because the property values have increased that much, doubled, tripled, and they just couldn't afford to stay. So they had to either sell and move on or lose it. Couldn't even and can't keep on to it because of the property taxes and other things that drive the market up. But wow, with that being said, man, I mean, what do you suggest, you know, most people do, especially like a lot of our followers are starters, you know, they're just starting out in the business and especially when it comes to doing stuff out of state. How would you state the best way to go out of town and actually buy a piece of property? I want you to just walk me through the steps. How does it work?
Sure. And so a lot of it has to do with what is the investor's goal.
Okay.
So with any investment asset, they typically fall into two categories:
Okay.
appreciation or cash flow. Appreciation is buy low, sell high.
All right.
For real estate, that's flipping. For cash flow, that's buy and hold, become a landlord, and you get monthly rent, right? So according to their risk level and according to what their goals are, if they're looking at flipping, and you're here in California, you need to team up with a good team on the ground that has experience with flipping, understands the market. And so you would generally enter into what's called a joint venture with a flipper.
A JV, okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so the flipper would have the contacts with all of the hard money lenders, and so they would basically come with their equity portion. Mm-hmm. And if you're dealing with an experienced flipper, they may have to put down as little as 10% of the total project cost. Mm-hmm. And so if you've got that cash, and again, we're talking about $40,000 a house, wow. Right? So if you're talking about the flipper that needs to come up with, let's say, 20%, right. They got to come up with $8,000. Right. You can do a joint venture with that flipper, provide the $8,000 cash. The flipper then manages everything, the acquisition, the rehab, the sale, and then upon the sale, they pay off the hard money lender. They give you back your investment, and then what's left is profit, okay. And then you split the profit according to however the joint venture agreement states. Mm-hmm. That's one real simple, easy, hands-off, passive way to get involved and to get into flipping. And in that situation, let's just run the numbers real quick.
Okay.
So $40,000 all in. Mm-hmm. Let's say they're able to sell it for $60,000, and you make a net profit after everything of $20,000.
Okay.
Okay. Because you put in that $8,000, mm-hmm. that $8,000 has turned into $20,000, mm-hmm. and so out of that $20,000, you're going to get your $8,000 back. All right. And so now you've got 12 to split. Let's say you split it 50-50. Mm-hmm. So now you got $6,000. So you turned your $12,000 into $18,000. That's a 50% profit, mm-hmm. over typically a 3 to 6 month period.
Not bad. Yeah, not bad at all.
And this is just a general example.
That's right. And again, that's a general, mm-hmm. simple, mm-hmm. example. There's a lot more into it. There's a lot more cost, right? Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I do in my expertise is running pro forma to show you all the costs and to take into consideration what that expectation actually is. But that just gives you an idea from a flipping perspective.
Okay. Well, thank you for that example. That sounds very safe, and it sounds a lot easier than putting, $100,000 down here in California. So I don't know. I mean, I like to dive into it a little further, maybe on another show, moving forward in the future. But there was another aspect outside of flipping that you spoke of.
Yeah, and that's buy and hold.
Okay.
Because the question is, who are these rehabbers flipping properties to?
Okay.
They are mainly flipping the properties to out-of-state investors.
Got you.
Out-of-country investors.
I got you.
People who understand that their money goes further when they buy a house in Detroit and they get more cash flow than they do, say, in California or New York or any of these other states,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so from a buy and hold perspective, now let's take that same property, three bedroom, 1 bath property that the rehabber, it cost them $40,000. They sold it to an out-of-state investor for $60,000.
Okay.
The out-of-state investor now is able to rent that typically for about $1,000 to $1,200 per month.
Okay.
And so the important number to understand is what's called the rent to price ratio. It's the monthly rent divided by the cost of the house. So keep numbers simple. If you can rent it for $1,200 and it costs you $60,000, your rent to price ratio is 2%. Okay? Take those same numbers and let's try to apply them here to California. $600,000 house where I live, at the most you'll be able to rent it for $4,000 a month.
$4,000. Okay.
$4,000.
Okay.
Right? So $600,000 gets you $4,000 in California. Take that $600,000, get 10 houses in Detroit that rent for $1,200. That's $12,000.
Yeah, not to mention a $400,000 house note is quite considerable nowadays. So,
well, we're not even talking about what the note is.
Yeah.
Right. We're just talking about from a renting perspective, how much cash flow, how much rent, gross rent, are you going to get?
Yeah.
So you get $4,000 in California, you get $12,000 in Detroit. That's 3 times as much.
Yeah.
That's just the simple, basic math.
Simple math. Wow.
Now, what I see is a lot of people who want to get into real estate investment. They're always attracted to the flipping because you can make the $20,000, $30,000, $100,000 off of that. And that's exciting to them. Where buy and hold, even though it's $1,200 a month and then minus operating costs and taxes and all that, I mean, you're lucky to get $400, $500 a month. Why is that? Why is buy and hold still the best way to create generational wealth?
Right. So when I teach people how to become financially independent, right, I've got a whole seminar. One of the things I talk about is you need to treat your money like your children. And when they are young, you need to help them grow. And the way that you grow your money is through appreciation deals. So this is where the flipping comes in, right? And so you want to grow your money. But you want to grow your money to reach what's called a financial independence number. And that is the amount of money that you, or amount of income producing assets that you need to have to generate a monthly income to where you can afford to live the life you want without having to work. And that is the ultimate goal, right? So you got to get that a certain amount of income producing assets, and then you shift your whole investment mentality, because now your whole thing is not about growing your money, it's about protecting your money so your money can create cash flow. And the number one way that rich people stay rich, how they go through every recession, depression, is by having income producing assets, and the number one income producing asset is real estate. So you have real estate that you can rent in regardless of what the economic climate is. Now, we go back to those Class A, B, and C, and D type of real estate investments. When we're in a recession, those in Class A can no longer afford to stay in Class A. So what do? They downsize and they go to Class B.
Right.
Those in Class B can't afford Class B, so they go to Class C. Those in Class C generally will stay in Class C because the only place for them to go is Class D, subsidized housing. And subsidized housing, which means that you've got a government payer source, Section 8, VA, social services programs, those are recession-proof. And so the one thing that we learned in the first 18 months of COVID, and there was no real estate investor out here who ever imagined that they could own a piece of real estate and have to keep a tenant in and not be able to evict them if they didn't pay rent.
That was crazy.
No one took that risk into account. So with our model, when we're going into our hard-hit neighborhoods, we are making sure all of the properties are Section 8 quality properties that can be rented to Section 8. Because in Detroit, no Section 8 landlords missed a payment during the first 18 months of COVID.
That's really important. That is really important because one of the biggest things out here in California, and it's starting to show its ugly face now moving forward into 23, is they had a lot of stops on foreclosures and a lot of stops on evictions. And we're going to see a lot of that coming up here in February when the laws have retracted, and they're going to now start allowing people to do the evictions and to do the foreclosures again, due to COVID being gone or COVID not showing its ugly face as much as it was. So in Detroit, you're saying they don't have a magnitude of that same issue or that same problem because there were government issued checks and they continued to roll even during the COVID incident.
Right. So Detroit, like every other community across the United States, landlords who didn't have government payment sources were not able to evict their tenants, and the tenants didn't have to pay. So the landlord suffered. Yeah. But if you had a Section 8 tenant, the housing authorities continued to pay.
Wow.
Right? And so that's another way that we manage risk.
Something to think about.
Well, really, it's about having a system.
Yeah.
And knowing how to really protect that system, no matter what the condition is of the economy. And as we're talking, I'm thinking about, with flipping, and you talk about rich people, and with the flipping, you can make, again, going back to the $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and that was my history. I was really into flipping, and it's nice to have that profit at the end, and it felt really good. But that's how you become rich. But to create wealth is when you start going for the long-term strategy. And even though, you're making that couple $100 a month per door, but as you're building your doors and you're getting, 10, 20, 30 doors a month, you're talking about wealth for not only you, but as you pass it on to the following generation, they will have that ongoing, and they don't have to worry about selling the house, losing the house like we were talking about.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, and so I mean, we have a complete strategy from flipping to buy and hold to creating the portfolio, taking advantage of opportunity zones and opportunity funds, to not only create these black communities that are owned and controlled by black people, but simultaneously create generational wealth, right? So we've got a whole strategy behind that, and to that end, what we've done is we've created a network of investment clubs, and so we are creating and rolling out our first investment club that's going to invest in our proof of concept, what we call our flip and hold strategy. It's a closed sales system to where we have a flip company that goes out, buys distressed properties, rehabs it, and flips it. And if for some reason after 3 months they're not able to flip it to somebody who wants to live into it, they then put a tenant in it, try to flip it to an out-of-state investor. And if for some reason they can't do that, they then flip it to our buy and hold company that's in a position to buy that property, rent it out, buys it at a predetermined price so that the flip company knows that there's a minimum amount of profit that they're going to make. The buy and hold company buys it at a price that they know they'll be able to rent the property to make a certain amount of profit on an annual basis, and they're in a position to hold that property for at least 10 years because there's a third company that provides the financing, and they're all related companies, and it allows the members of the investment clubs to invest in different positions. You can invest in the flip company, invest in the buy and hold company, you can invest in the finance company that lends the money out to buy the home. It's a closed sales system, and we're rolling this out in Detroit now.
Okay, well, wow. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way, man? Because I'm pretty sure you're going to have a whole lot of questions.
Sure. The best way is you can email me at helpkeepmymoney@gmail.com. You can also go to my website, helpkeepmymoney.com. I'm also on Instagram under Help Keep My Money. I'm on Twitter, on Facebook. You can look up the BNIC network. And you can also just give me a call, 661-524-6674.
Thank you so much, Mr. Michael Evans. That was great, man. And with us, Real Quest Realty, again, I'm Ron Cunningham, and this is Jocelyn. And the best way to get to us is our Instagram. This is Real Quest Realty Corp. And we also have a Facebook with the same name, Real Quest Realty Corp. Our number is 310-205-5200. And stay tuned. Make sure you hit like, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're constantly bringing information and people who know the business, even sometimes better than I. I got 25 years. Jocelyn has 20 years. But there's always something new in the business. I'm very good at loans. Jocelyn's very good at brokering and putting deals together. Mike's very good in the Detroit market. We all have something that we do in the same industry, but we all have a niche. So that's kind of what the team of us are doing today. We've all teamed up and decided to do this Detroit market together. And you will see and hear from us again in the near future. We're coming out with right now what we're working on, Jocelyn, with the video, with the webinar. And
Yes, we're really opening up our training system. And these are people who are new to real estate investment, as well as people who are seasoned. Mm-hmm. And so as we talked about in this whole segment about having a system, we show you how to have that system, how to be a part of these networks to be able to create that generational wealth.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that.
Thank you so much, guys. We will definitely be back to you. We just wanted to give you some more information, dropping these gems. Again, I'm Ron Cunningham with Real Quest Realty. Thank you for signing in, and we're signing out.